2 p.m. today, the Security Council of these United Nations will begin a high-level open debate on the Middle East. That will be chaired by the Foreign Minister of France, Stéphane Séjourné. The Secretary General will make opening remarks, and we will share those remarks with you as soon as they are shared with me. Meanwhile, I know you've been asking about Sigrid Kaag. I can tell you that our Senior Humanitarian Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza, along with Jamie McGoldrick, the Humanitarian Coordinator at interim for the occupied Palestinian territory, visited Rafah in Gaza. There they met with civilians and saw the UN's own humanitarian operations. While in Gaza, they also met with representatives of various UN agencies, international non-government organizations operating in Gaza, as well as Palestinian relief workers. Despite the major obstacles to the humanitarian response, we and our partners are continuing to address the acute famine risks across the Gaza Strip. Between the 15th and the 21st of January, about 1.2 million people were reached with at least one form of food assistance. More than half of those distributions were made in Rafah, 21% in Khan Younis in the south. Over a quarter of that assistance reached Deir al Balah in central Gaza, with 14% going to the northern governorates. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that civilians have been severely impacted by the escalating hostilities yesterday in the Khan Younis area. Dozens of people were reportedly killed, including displaced women and children, and several homes in other buildings were also destroyed. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society reported to us that Israeli forces had surrounded their ambulance headquarters in Khan Younis, restricting ambulances from providing support in the area. Israeli forces reportedly struck the vicinity of Al-Hamal Hospital and ambulance headquarters. As intense fighting continued in the area, patients and displaced people sheltering there could not leave. The World Health Organization reports that attacks on health care continue to rise. In the Gaza Strip, more than 300 attacks have been verified since the beginning of the hostilities on October 7th. In the West Bank as well, WHO reports a significant rise in attacks against healthcare, with more than 330 attacks reported since the 7th of October. Humanitarian health partners report severe shortages of medical staff in some of the hospitals in Gaza. Only 12% of medical doctors working at Al-Aqsa Hospital, which is about 10% of the doctors who operated there before the start of the hostilities. North of Gaza, we and our partners managed to visit the Al-Shifa Hospital yesterday after 5 days of denied aborted missions. They delivered fuel, which is obviously in very short supply. Thousands of people have sought shelter at the hospital, where equipment, water, and food are also scarce. As we told you, the intense hostilities and repeated access denials continue to severely restrain our access, especially in the northern part of Gaza. Also, a programming note: tomorrow at 10 a.m. From Jerusalem, we will have a live connection with Jamie McGoldrick, who will brief you on the humanitarian situation. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian coordinator in that country, Denise Brown, condemned the latest wave of aerial attacks that took place this morning on Kyiv and Kharkiv, Ukraine's largest urban centers, as well as Pavlograd, which is in Dnipro area. In the capital, Kyiv, the attacks caused damage to civilian buildings just next to the UN offices. Ms. Brown said that civilians who were just preparing for work or getting ready to go to school ended up hospitalized because of the attacks. In Kharkiv, our humanitarian colleagues on the ground tell us that many buildings were impacted and civilians killed and injured as rescuers are trying to find people under the rubble of a residential building. The attacks left tens of thousands of families, businesses, and institutions without electricity this morning. That's what the Energy Ministry is telling our colleagues in Kyiv. Water and gas supplies were also impacted, and on a day where temperatures are below freezing in the city. The attacks also caused loss and destruction in the Dnipro region. Meanwhile, in the east and the south of the country, fierce fighting and hostilities continue to take a heavy toll on civilians. And on the response side, we, along with our partners, are providing emergency assistance, including first aid, psychosocial support, and materials for emergency repairs. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our humanitarian colleagues there tell us that the flood situation remains dire, with nearly half of the country's 26 provinces being impacted by severe flooding. That includes the capital, Kinshasa. According to the Congolese authorities, more than 400,000 households need emergency assistance, including food, shelter, and healthcare support. The humanitarian coordinator in that country, Bruno Le Marquis, visited affected communities in Kinshasa and expressed deep concern over the precarious living conditions in these areas. Some families live in their flooded houses, increasing the risk, of course, of waterborne diseases, which could potentially overwhelm an already strained healthcare system. We and our partners are working closely with the Congolese authorities to develop an emergency response plan and mitigate a public health crisis. Humanitarian organizations are providing emergency assistance, such as health care to the injured, and implementing measures to prevent the risk of outbreaks and diseases. We're also active on the ground, supporting local organizations to carry out assessment. And in the east of the DRC, peacekeeping colleagues are continuing to protect the main supply route leading towards Goma and Sake, that's in North Kivu. They're also assisting the Congolese army to prevent the M23 armed group from advancing towards both Sake and Goma. Peacekeepers and Congolese armed forces are deployed in Maïsi, Rutshuru, and Nyiragongo, patrolling key areas. As we mentioned before, the mission established a security perimeter near its Kinshanga base to help protect some 25,000 men, women, and children who are seeking shelter due to the prevailing insecurity we've been telling you about. The presence of peacekeepers also enables the delivery of humanitarian assistance to those who need it. And turning to Somalia, our colleagues at OCHA are also warning that cholera and acute watery diarrhea are spreading. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that more than 470 cases were reported during the second week of January. That includes at least 9 deaths. Most of these cases were in Hirshabelle State in central Somalia, where there was severe flooding during the rainy season last year. We, along with our partners, are scaling up the response to flood-affected districts. We're also preparing for further flooding expected during the April to June rainy season. But underfunding for the humanitarian response remains a critical concern. Last year's $2.6 billion needed to help 7.6 million people in Somalia was less than 44% funded, which means we received just about $1.1 billion. And in Tanzania, also related to floods, our team there, led by the resident coordinator, Zlatan Milicic, is ready to further assist the government. Our teams and partners have been supporting the impacted areas of Hanang in the northeast of the Manyara region for the past month. Approximately 140 people are injured, with over 9,000 affected and hundreds of displaced. The World Food Program is distributing food rations, WHO focusing on disease prevention, and UNICEF providing water and sanitation services, distributing hygiene kits, water tanks, and more. And for its part, the UN Population Fund distributed 1,200 dignity kits for women and girls, while the International Organization for Migration joined the team's assessment to further support the needs of displaced people. In the Rohingyas, just a note from UNHCR says they're alarmed by statistics revealing a surge of the number of Rohingya refugees dying or going missing while risking very dangerous boat journeys in the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal during last year. Some 569 people, the majority of whom were women and children, were reportedly to have perished or gone missing last year in Southeast Asian waters, with nearly 4,500 Rohingyas embarking on deadly sea journeys, a significant increase over 2022. The findings for last year also include some shocking details, with survivors sharing horrifying accounts of abuse and exploitation during their journey, including gender-based violence. UNHCR calls on regional and coastal authorities to take urgent action to prevent further tragedies. You will get a question if you answer my question, okay? Yeah, and we're going to forget about food today. We're going to focus on language. We have one nation to thank for its full contribution to the regular budget. So if I were to say to you, Gurev Mila Ma Agriv, to who would I be speaking to and in what language? What? No, I would be speaking Gaelic, and I would be saying thank you to our friends in Bulia, Aha Kli Aha, or as you like to say, Dublin. So we thank our Irish friends wholeheartedly. Not moi, I can tell you that. Ibtisam.
Shukran. I asked you yesterday after the noon briefing, sent you a question regarding ICJ numbers, how many people watched the South Africa versus Israel ICJ hearing, and if you have a breakdown regarding the first day and the second day, and a broader context. And I have another question later.
I mean, the numbers, which I think I shared with you, and this is just from our webcast, folks who said there were about 1.4 million views across the 2 days of the ICJ hearings, with around 1 million on day one and about 400,000 on day two. Our webcast people are telling me that's about 10 times what they usually see for proceedings from the ICJ.
Okay, I have another question regarding in social media, the director of the Israeli Antiquities Authority published a video, what seems to be stolen antiquities from Gaza universities that were bombed by the Israelis. Do you have any comments on that? Do you believe that this should go, like, any comments first?
I haven't seen that particular report. We'll look into it. Obviously, I mean, as any conflict, it is important that historical artifacts be protected and respected, but we'll look into that.
And on yesterday, you were asked about the suggestions by Israeli foreign minister to have an island to basically displace Palestinians and to send them there. And in your in a follow-up question that you were asked, you said, I think people are allowed to determine their own future. I guess my question here is not about whether people should determine their own future or not, is rather in these contexts, which we heard several times in the past, where Israeli officials are talking about forced displacement and putting it in a different wording. Could you please tell us?
Well, I mean, we strongly stand against any forced displacement. In this context, forced displacement of the Palestinian people. This idea of an island is, I don't think, is one we would support. Edie.
Two questions, Steph. First, does the Secretary General have any reaction to the Iranian hanging today of a prisoner who was a protester during the protests that followed the death of Mahsa Amini, the young woman who was pulled over for inappropriately wearing a headscarf?
We continue to stand against and condemn the use of the death penalty. Deji. Sorry, you had another question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, Deji.
Okay, two questions. First, do you have any updates on the trucks of the humanitarian aids into Gaza? From
No, I think, you know.
What would be the obstacles now?
Well, the obstacles continue first that the fighting is continuing. Obstacles continue to be the very complex and difficult procedures for screening, and obstacles continue also to be in I mean, one of the other issues is obviously our lack of transport on the inside, but it's also just volume. But I think truck counting is probably not the best indicator. We're just not getting enough aid in.
Yes, the Security Council resolution, last one, suggests that the UN should expand its humanitarian delivery operations, but it seems it's not being implemented.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons the council created the post that Sigrid Kaag has is to expand the humanitarian deliveries in Gaza, to create a mechanism. She's on her first tour of the region. She went to Gaza again today. She will be back here to report to the council on her work.
Any expectations, like when would this so-called expanded operation would go?
I think if I were to give you a hard date, I would be very silly indeed.
Okay, my second issue is, yesterday I asked you about
Question, I
the.
hope
Oh,
so.
sorry.
Yeah.
Not
maybe
necessarily
you have an
the
issue
second
with me.
question
I don't
got.
know. Yeah, okay,
Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah.
I just trying to find a word rather
Okay,
than question
I
because I
understand.
asked too many questions already.
I understand.
So okay, yesterday I asked you about the ceasefire. I asked you about the release of hostages. It's been reported that Israel wants to suggest a ceasefire of 2 months in order to in exchange of the release of all hostages. Has the UN saw this?
Well, we're aware.
And what was-
We're aware of these reports. We're obviously waiting to see what further developments. But we're obviously, I mean, we do read the newspapers and we're aware of.
But do you think that would work?
We are not a party to the
Or you
conflict.
hope that would be
right.
work-
We're not a party to what we're hoping for is what we've been hoping for since the beginning is a continued humanitarian ceasefire. Okay, Benny.
Couple of questions. By the way, that offer was rejected by Hamas, but put that aside. I noticed that in your preamble, you the opening statement.
Yeah, opening statement.
You listed a whole lot of operations in Gaza. You did not mention the largest UN operation in Gaza. So, question, does the Secretary General see a role for UNRWA in the post-war?
Well, the role for UNRWA continues. UNRWA continues to be our largest humanitarian operation in Gaza. They continue to provide, let me put it this way, the Secretary General, he said this before the 7th of October, believe UNRWA plays a critical role in supporting many Palestinians on education, on healthcare, and other services, and it plays a stabilizing role in the region. He will continue to believe that.
And when you were asked before about the UN Watch exposure of some comments, some thousands of comments by UNRWA employees, you say you poo-pooed it.
I don't think I ever used that wording.
Poo-poo, you used, there was saying that the record speaks for itself as far as
I also
remember.
said, if you look at the transcript, I also said that UNRWA takes these things seriously.
So I understand-
And I know they do. I mean, in fact, I was talking to Philippe Lazzarini about an hour ago, and they take these things very seriously.
So what does that mean? Is there an investigation into these?
They
Because
look
now,
into it, they
now
take-
names
they take-
and numbers have been...
whenever they're able to, they do look into it. They take disciplinary action when needed and when things are proven.
And on another question, from what I understand, the Secretary General for the first time was not invited to an event in a synagogue in New York on Holocaust Memorial Day. Do you have any
Which
information
particular
about-
event are you speaking about?
Pardon?
Which specific event are you speaking about?
The same event he goes to every
The
year.
Park East Synagogue. The event from we've been speaking to the organizer. The event has changed in nature from previous years, where it used to be an event for the diplomatic community. It is not this year. And I was speaking to them, in fact, just yesterday. It is an event, from what they're telling us, more focused on the events of October 7th, the terror attacks by Hamas, and a healing event for the community. So it is no longer a diplomatic event. So it is only natural the Secretary General not be present. It is not the same event they've had.
It
in
is the UN. The Holocaust Day memorial.
The Secretary General will be very present on Friday in the General Assembly at the annual commemoration, Holocaust commemoration. You're asking me about an event that's off
Right.
campus, to which he was, in its previous iteration, he was there and his predecessors were there. It is no longer the same event. It is no longer an event for the diplomatic community. That's why he will not be attending.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Volodymyr Ichenko, National News Agency of Ukraine. While Russian Minister Lavrov is here at the UN Security Council saying that there is no need to help Ukraine, his troops, as you mentioned, have bombed Ukrainian cities in my native Kyiv today. There are dead and wounded. What should be the Secretary General's reaction to these words of a Russian minister?
Well, the Secretary General's reaction has been consistent since the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I mean, he has been saying the same things very consistently, defending Ukraine's territorial integrity, defending the Charter of the United Nations, defending international law, and calling for an end to the conflict. Gabriel, and then Abdelhamid, and then Pam.
Thank you, Stéphane. Regarding Kaag's visit to Gaza, can you give us any more details about roughly how long she was there?
I don't know. I mean, I know. Let me just put it this way: it was during daylight hours, but you know,
Okay.
I don't know. Is the short answer. If I can give you some.
No, safe to say, due to the security situation, it was.
Well, I mean, it was
hours
meant to
yeah.
be a day visit. I think one can assume that it was done during daylight hours.
Cool. Thank you. And Hamas today urged the UN to step in immediately and shoulder their responsibilities, their words, to stop Israel's attacks on Gaza hospitals, given how serious the situation has turned in the last 24 hours, as you mentioned at the podium. Does the Secretary General have a reaction to this?
Again, I think our actions speak for themselves. We have done whatever is humanly possible to support the healthcare system. I mean, I think you had one of our colleagues from WHO a few weeks ago describing in great detail the mission they launched to save newborn babies. We went to Shifa Hospital yesterday. We're operating in the midst of an active combat zone and doing whatever is humanly possible to support the healthcare system. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. At least 16 cemeteries in Gaza have been desecrated by Israeli forces. Satellite imagery and videos reveal, according to CNN report. Do you have any comment on that?
We've seen those reports. I've seen the disturbing video. I think these are things that need to be thoroughly investigated.
Also, Haaretz yesterday issued another investigation saying that it was Israeli Air Force that hit the party, which killed 360 people, including Palestinian. It said, Haaretz said, that the Hamas fighters didn't know anything about that party. Would that inspire people to change their discourse about who was killed and what happened?
I think there is still there still needs to be a lot to be investigated, but the fact that Hamas committed acts of terror on 7 October, I think, remains an undeniable fact.
My last question. In the West Bank now, over 6,000 had been arrested since October 7, including 340 children, 80 women. Are these considered what? Hostages, detainees? How the UN should address this issue of now over 10,000 Palestinians altogether in Israeli detention centers and jails?
I think the Secretary General will speak to that in his remarks, and we have repeatedly spoken out on the issues of detainees in a very consistent manner. We'll continue to do so. Pamela.
Thank you, Steph. Thank Thank you. The IAA DG Grossi is here. Is it, and the latest report is that there was some power that was cut in the last 2 days to Zaporizhia and making a lot of people very worried about it. Is there any chance of getting a briefing from him, or will there be any?
You can ask his office, we can ask his office, and we'll see who he says yes to.
And does he have meetings with the SG? Any knowledge of his?
I mean, I have very little knowledge of a lot of things, and off the top of my head, I don't know.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, you know
Okay.
everything.
Yeah. Miriam,
Thank you, Stefan. I have two questions. One is regarding Iran. Last night, 2 other protesters were prosecuted by the Islamic Republic of Iran without due court dates or any other investigations. The foreign minister is here. Is the Secretary General planning to address the prosecution in Iran, especially after the protests last year and after Mahsa Amini's death? And also, I have a question about Afghanistan.
we will share with you a readout of the meeting. I don't like to preempt whatever will be discussed, but I think as you've seen from readouts of meetings with the Secretary General and senior Iranian officials, he has repeatedly raised human rights concerns in those meetings.
A lot of people, I have to ask this question because a lot of people have this question, and I don't know if this question is for you, but I'll ask it anyway because people want me to ask you this question. How can a government or an official from a country like a government like Iran, which is prosecution is like through the roof, can still travel to meetings like the Security Council or to the UN without being held accountable?
Listen, I think let's step back. This is an organization of 193 member states. It is important that every member state has the ability to take part in discussions, right? It does not stop, and I can only speak for the Secretary General. Other member states will have their own opinion, and they have tools to address those issues. It does not stop the Secretary General from speaking his mind and calling out violations of international law, violations of human rights, right? So I will leave it. At that. Stefano, and then Linda.
Thank you, Stéphane. About the Security Council reform, when the Secretary General says...
That's definitely not a question for me, but go ahead. No, go ahead, sorry.
No, it is a question
That's
for
always,
you.
go ahead.
Because you just, yesterday, you mentioned that the Secretary General in Africa said that is for the permanent, for Africa to have a seat as a permanent member. So, did you say that yesterday? I think
the Secretary General said it in his remarks that he thought it was and I don't know if the word was outrage, but he said it was unimaginable that there is not a permanent member from Africa on the Security Council.
Exactly. So my question is, is the position of the Secretary General now a specific position about the Security Council reform means that he wants a new permanent members in the Security Council?
I think what the Secretary General, I think, is expressing, his opinion, I think, is reflective of a lot of people's opinion, right? That you have a whole continent where, in fact, a lot of the UN's peace and security work is ongoing. And no member state from that continent sits on the body that discusses and decides policies relating to peace and security, right? And he's talked about the injustice of those countries that were former colonies, that were penalized twice, once by being colonized, and second, by not even being at the table when the architecture of the multilateral system was discussed. How member states decide on Security Council reform, what that will look like will be up to them. He's made his feelings known, and I think it's not the first time he's said something like that. But in the end, it will be up to member states themselves to decide.
So,
And whether or not they take into account the view of Antonio Guterres, we will see.
so basically, from your answer, he agrees for Africa to
Well, I
have
mean,
it.
he
And
said
you
it,
say,
so
but
I hope
no,
he
let's say
agrees.
Japan or Germany. or-
He didn't specify specific country. He pointed out that a whole continent is not represented.
And then another question is on Haiti. What is
On what?
Haiti?
Oh, Haiti, yeah. sorry.
Yeah, there is this situation where, I mean, I think it's last October that then the Security Council approved a mission there. But the situation is actually worse than ever. So is any new action that the Secretary General is thinking to do to try to move
listen,
things?
I think he laid out an option which the Security Council adopted, and we hope that member states will coalesce and move forward as quickly as possible around the option that they themselves decided upon. Linda Fasulo.
Thank you, Steph. This is in regard to the war, which has been going on.
Which one?
That's true. Which one? The Hamas-Israeli war. And my question is, we know it's been going on nearly 3.5 months. Given the UN's major role in Gaza, humanitarian among other things, how would you characterize the relationship or the level of access that the UN has with Hamas? In other words, what is the relationship? Is anything discussed about, ending the war or the hostages or anything like that?
I mean, as in many places where we operate, in places where there are de facto authorities, right, that are just by fact are in charge, we deal with them on an operational level.
Is there anything specifically on a political level that might be occurring?
I will stick to my first answer. Yes, all the way in the back.
You must have like an updated list of the numbers of the UN employee who have been killed in Gaza. And my question is, how do you approach to Israel in terms of those victims? Do you communicate any messages? Have you urged them to stop bombing the places where your employee, or at least the sheltering places that
Yes.
you offer?
Is a short answer.
And have you heard back from them? And how do you assess their response so far after you
Well,
talked
I mean,
to them?
I think you can assess the response as well as I can. Sir, Ahmed, please.
Thank you, Steph. Let me pivot a little bit from Gaza and Middle East to North Africa, Sudan. A couple of days ago, there was a report about the atrocities perpetrated by the Rapid Support Forces and their commander, General Dangolo Hameti. Some of the compelling numbers, 15,000 fatalities, 7.5 million displaced, and this is, we're talking about Darfur. We're not speaking about the whole of Sudan. I'm seeking to see what's the Secretary General reaction towards the latest report, and does he see a role for the United Nations to leverage the mediation or the process to end this brutal civil war?
we have been, the crisis in Sudan is one that arguably has been underreported. We keep efforting here to keep it in the news. I mean, I mentioned Sudan usually more than once a week, and the horrific things that are going on. From the UN side, there is a commission of inquiry set up by the Human Rights Council that has started its work. They were in Port Sudan. Also, Ramtan Lamamra has been appointed as the personal envoy of the Secretary General. He has been to the region and will continue to focus his work on the political side, working with African institutions, whether it's the African Union or whether it's IGAD. And we're hoping that the international community, all those countries that have an influence over the parties one way or another, will all work towards bringing this horrific suffering of the Sudanese people to an end. Tony.
Shukran, Steph. The Iraqi government said they submitted a complaint to the Security Council and the SG as well. First, can you confirm that the SG received this complaint?
I will check if the letter was received.
Okay, the letter was regarding following the Iranian attack.
And often there are, member states send letters to the Secretary General in his capacity as Secretary General to be circulated to the Security Council as official documents. So let me check if that letter
because
was
the Security Council confirmed that they received it.
Yes, so if they received it, the Secretary General received it because he's the postmaster in a sense.
Okay, so any comments on this?
I mean, we have
repeatedly
called for Iran and all member states to respect the territorial integrity of Iraq. Mike.
I'm sorry if the question was already asked. I had to step out. Do you have any readout or any details from Sigrid Kaag's meeting with the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister yesterday?
No, no specific readout. Just to say that she met with him yesterday as part of her initial mission to the region. She had met with a number of Israeli officials, including the president and members of the security cabinet or the war cabinet on Sunday. So, but no meat, but just the schedule.
What is she or the UN more broadly speaking expect or desire or try to get out of the Palestinian Authority in terms of facilitating the entry of humanitarian aid?
We're trying to get everyone on board to support the mandate given to her in the Security Council resolution.
Nothing specific?
Specific is to get more humanitarian aid in.
What role can the Palestinian Authority play in that?
Everyone has a role to play.
I wanted to follow up on something. Resolution, I think it was 2712. The Security Council asked the Secretary General to draw up some options for scaling up humanitarian aid. He provided 3 options. Has the Security Council selected one of those options? Where's that process right now?
Then we had the subsequent resolution creating the role for Sigrid Kaag. Yeah. Yvonne, I didn't see you, and I'm embarrassed that I tried to speak Gaelic in your presence.
Don't ever try that again.
Yeah, no, trust me, I won't do it again until the Irish pay next year. Yes.
Sorry. It was just really after an impression of what the Secretary General hopes and expects from today, considering there are lots of important people in town. We've seen Security Council resolutions come and go. He's been calling for humanitarian ceasefire since October. What are his hopes for today?
His hopes are for unified voices on the Security Council to push and support his call for humanitarian ceasefire, to support the resolution that was adopted, and to move away from conflict towards peace. Edith, and then Abdelhamid. Oh, sorry, and then go ahead.
Steph, can we get an update on what Hans Grunberg is doing in Yemen to try and alleviate this escalating?
Yes, I will try to get that for you. Abdelhamid.
2 questions. First, the Belgium Prime Minister today said that she would be calling for an international conference to start imposing what she said, or starting the process for the 2-state solution. Are you aware of this?
I haven't seen that.
Okay. The second question, when you know that there are 8 universities has been demolished, 150 schools, 680,000 children don't go to school, and some people are still calling it war between Israel and Hamas. Is that a fair description of what's going in Gaza?
It's a description that we're using. Last question.
Is that right? Is that correct?
Well, we are very transparent in the words that we use, the Secretary General words that he uses. Up to you to support them, to criticize them, to analyze them, but I can only use the words that I use. last question, because I have a meeting with my boss in literally 45 seconds.
Thank you so much. According to the Astana Times, the Astana meetings starts again, and according to the news story, UN is sending observers. Is that correct?
I will check. We'll check with Geir Pedersen's office. Okay. See you this afternoon.